Okay, welcome back. So we had gotten into a convoluted conversation one day on a Sunday about intuition and what is intuition. And I tried briefly to talk about my experience of intuition, very unsuccessfully. And so then if you were there, and then I was asked to talk about that tonight and I was like, what makes you think I'll be any more successful talking about it tonight? But I was, really, it's a great contemplation. What is intuition, right? And how does it work in our meditation, mindfulness practice, and our Buddhist practice if you're into Buddhism? And how can we develop and trust this natural intuition that we all have, and know that a lot of what I'm saying can't be proven scientifically. That the truth is they really don't know what intuition is. There's a lot of postulating about what intuition is. And my sharing of intuition is from experience only and from how I'm processing intuition, right? And your experience might be different. And I would expect that that's normal and that's okay. As and I can tell you that my idea or experience of intuition is totally different than what it was, say, 30 years ago. So, as my practice and understanding and wisdom develops, so does my experience of intuition. So, I looked up intuition and psychology today and trying to figure out from their vantage point what is intuition. And they're saying it's a form of knowledge that a person um, this knowledge appears in consciousness without any obvious deliberation, without any cognitive, obvious thinking processes that happen. A lot of people refer to them as gut feelings or gut intuition, that just arises holistically, quickly, without any awareness that it's going to arise, without any invitation of it arising, right? It's just kind of like phew, shows up in the moment. Uh, they're rapid, right? Intuition happens like instantaneously. It's not a gradual coming on usually. Um, And according to the psychologists, they think that these are subtle perceptual cues and judgments um, that we pick up on from other people or other animals who have the intention to either help us or harm us. And that all these automatic unconscious processes are happening underneath the surface, obviously unconsciously, that our brain is picking up on all this different information and cues in our environment from people. And it's comparing and contrasting all this data to previous experiences and then giving us a like a warning or approach, you can approach this person or avoid this person, or neutrality. It's all okay, right? But a they think there's rapid evaluation processes going on in the background. And I know, have you guys ever watched that show Lie to Me? Uh, I think it's on Netflix. But anyhow, he is an expert at reading people's cues, and apparently there are people like this, that if you move your face a certain way, or lopsided smile, or look up to the left, or look up to the right, uh, that these things mean something. Surprise looks a certain way, facially. So does when you're making something up. I think, is it looking up to your left when it's not true, or looking up to your right when it is, something like that. So there are all of these um, things that they've noticed are cues, and we're animals, right? We really are animals, and whether we're aware of it, animals use their sense of smell, their sense of hearing, and they could hear rapid heart rates, perhaps smell a little bit of extra sweat if someone's nervous when they're being dishonest. So all this data coming in on a sensual or sensory level that we might also be picking up on unconsciously, and then processing and realizing that there's something um, in our implicit memory banks that we're processing to give us these rapid intuitions. That makes sense, right? Uh, Yeah, like so they were talking about people, very young people don't have a lot of intuition, that it's something that comes through experience, that the more experiences you have, the stronger your intuitive abilities are here and there. So it has something to do with experience. But on the surface, when we try to think about it, it's not logical. It's not a result of considered steps. Okay, I'm going to do step B, step C, and figure this all out. Um, and it feels, real intuition feels very natural, instinctual. It doesn't feel deliberate or made up. Um, but the specialists say that you can't always trust your intuition. That when they've done studies on people's intuition, that most of the time intuitive hits are correct, but sometimes it's not. And they believe that when intuition is not correct, it's because people have misunderstood intuition or a cognitive process as intuition. For instance, they see someone, they think, oh, I can't trust them because whatever, and then they don't trust them. So there was a cognitive little quick thought that happened before the intuition in the conscious mind. Yeah. But for me, intuitive hits have been really interesting. But here's Seymour Epstein. He says intuition involves a sense of knowing without knowing how one knows, right? And psychology today went deeper into breaking it down between instinct and intuition, um, and how this intuition is bridging the gap between conscious mind and unconscious or non-conscious parts of our mind. Blah blah blah. You can really go deep into this rabbit hole. Trust me. uh, so, how does intuition develop? I've met a lot of people who, if they have intuition, they certainly aren't connected to it or using it, or it's not appearing. It's not arising to the surface of their conscious mind. Um, so my experience has been the more mindful I am, the more present I am, and sitting here with you, sitting in this room, sitting in any room, through my mindfulness practice, I've learned to just sit back and relax and have this receptivity of awareness. You know, if someone's talking to me, I cue in on them and I'm noticing everything that's happening with them. And then occasionally I'm scanning the environment to see what's happening in the environment. Through this relaxed awareness, my mind is able, or unconscious mind is able, to pick up on many, many, many of these different cues that are in my environment, right? And then the more often I do this, the stronger my intuition becomes. Because if I'm a computer, I've picked up on a lot of data that my unconscious mind can compare to, and then give me flashes of be careful here, approach here, don't approach there, right? And it comes from, so to me, mindfulness and being present experiences this intuitive ability to be present, to be fully in the here and the now, as Thich Nhat Hanh usually says. So it's not about thinking about things, it's about being present with what is. And when we can be present with what is, these intuitive hits naturally arise to the surface, because there's not all that thinking and cognizing and worrying and remembering and planning and rehearsing and fearing and all of that activity it stops the flow of intuitive hits to come to the surface, right? And even if an intuitive hit comes to the surface, people can't distinguish between their intuition and their cognition because there's so much going on, right? So for me, mindfulness, I spend most of my time in pretty quiet, a lot of non-thinking happening. And that's just from, 30 some years of intensive practice. So I believe that most quiet, a lot of quiet and non-thinking. There's certainly thinking too in the background, but more quiet, I believe. So that is the perfect environment, mindful and quiet, for intuition to arise. Um, Now, I have found that my experience of intuition is that it arises through my bodily sensations, right? If I can stay connected in the present moment to the body, the human body, my body will usually tell me what's happening before my mind understands what's happening. And we teach this. I'm a Taekwondo teacher. I taught Taekwondo for years. We teach people to be aware of what their body sees, what their body hears before their mind realizes that they hear. To block and move before we even see that an attack is coming. It's a weird thing, like the body, the senses, the body's picking up on all the different senses. And so I usually just keep myself mindfully connected to my chest and gut, the front part of my body, right? And paying attention to the sensations there. There's a relaxed awareness of the body. But whenever I'm particularly cued into whenever the body contracts, starts to tighten or feel kind of like a little bit icky, with a little slight contraction or major contraction, or if the body's feeling expansive and relaxed when I meet somebody new, I know that I don't have to protect myself, right? Whereas if my body is starting to contract and feel tight, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? There's some danger. I don't always, it's not something I understand cognitively, right? It's something that I just pay attention to, and it's been pretty right on. My body's warned me about a lot of things. Um, So we could make up that implicit memory and all of our past experiences are stored somehow, and that the body is picking up on this information through the mind body heart connection. I don't know. Um, a lot of people call it following their gut, right? Following their gut. What is that? It's a kind of gut reaction. Like maybe the gut is tightening a little bit or not feeling quite right. And a lot of people really trust their gut feelings. Um, but I think it's the very first thing to happen. And then after the body has a reaction, then the mind grabs hold of it, and then emotions will arise too. Um, so a lot of people say that they trust their feelings, trust your emotions, and I say, no, your emotions are not always accurate because your emotions are a cognitive, uh, usually connected to cognition, thinking. But to trust the bodily sensations, the angsty, uh, or the under the surface kind of mood atmosphere that's going on in the environment, I pay really close attention to that too. Like some days I wake up and I'm feeling troubled, agitated. There's something agitating, and I don't know what it is, right? Then I'm like, okay, be extra aware today, be extra mindful. Because my typically there's a potential for more weird things to happen on those kind of. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Right? Any show of hands? Um, when there's like a weird energetic atmosphere, mood atmosphere. If you look back at days where, all these bad things happened, you can usually go back and look that there was a weird kind of angsty uh, background before all of this started happening. You're usually not really up and happy and doing great, and then all of a sudden, all these terrible things start to happen. So I've learned my intuition to pay attention to the mood kind of background, mood atmosphere, because sometimes I feel that that is kind of warning me, if that makes any sense, and as well as my body. Now, neither one of these are emotions, and neither one of these are thoughts. Um, the mood is kind of like a feeling tone, background feeling tone. Um, a lot of people think that excitement is a really good thing. Not necessarily. Um, Pay attention intuitively. Yeah. So, from a Buddhist perspective, what is intuition? Right? From a Buddhist perspective, intuition is insight wisdom or panya. Panya. And actually, our practice, our mindfulness, or Buddhist practice, the if the goal, if there is one, is to develop insight wisdom. And it's this insight wisdom that we awaken to our true nature. The more insight wisdom we have, the more intuitive wisdom we have, the more awake we become, the more connected to our true nature we become. In Pali, the word panya is made up of pa and na. Na means to know, and pa means correctly. So panya means to know correctly what really is, to see correctly what really is. There are three different types of panya. The first comes from learning, right? The second kind of panya comes from thinking and reflecting. That's comparing and contrasting our experience to the past. That's consciousness. And the third comes from this insight, intuitive insights that we have through our meditation practice, through our mindfulness practice. Yeah. So the Buddha talked about this insight wisdom. The more we develop it, the more wise we become. And the people that don't develop it, the more foolish they are, the more ignorant they are. And he used the word fool a lot for people who are untrained. He said, this is a quote from the Dhammapada, the Buddha, that I really like. Quote number 63 in the Dhammapada. But a fool who thinks oneself wise really deserves to be called a fool. Oh, anyhow. So, insight wisdom, there are two different kinds. To my experience, there are two different kinds. The first comes from seeing things clearly, mindfully, from moment to moment to moment, seeing ourselves clearly, letting go of our self delusions, how we fool ourselves, right? Seeing the insight, intuitive insight is called seeing the Dharma clearly, seeing reality clearly from moment to moment to moment to moment, seeing what leads to what, which leads to what, which leads to what, with sustained mindful awareness, right? One doesn't see the Dhamma by rational thinking. Oh, I'm looking at the bell and I'm going to think about the bell. I wonder what alloy and what material it's made of. No, this side's more shiny than that. Am I learning any? No, right? I'm not picking up all of anything from the bell by thinking about it, but by seeing it, looking at it, smelling it, touching it. So these are the true inner realizations we have, just by being aware, moment to moment to moment. Maybe that's because the that information is going into the unconscious then. And then every so often we have these flashes of insights that you've probably had if you've been practicing a lot, um, which comes from a lot of meditation practice, a lot of deep mindful cultivation, which is just boom, these incredible insights where they just like flashes, and then we're changed forever. We never have the same perspective again. Right now, suddenly we're more compassionate or more loving, or we see suffering, people's pain and stress at a level that really shifts us, right? This past couple weeks, I've been buying and selling my house, buying another house, inspection, construction, you name it's been going on. And the last couple days, I've had one stressful event after another with my house, from threatened, people saying I have a gas leak, to my AC unit not working, with a bunch of different workers saying different things, and it's all worked out. But I was finding myself being really contracted and annoyed by all of the constantness of one thing after another after another. And so I was sitting with the angstiness in my body, and I just had this flash. Oh, it's all right. It's all right. None of this matters. No matter what happens, I'll be okay. It doesn't matter. So there was an immediate letting go and relaxing into what is. Whatever happens, happens. I'll deal with it, right? And it was one of those flash of insights. But it didn't just come from out of nowhere. It came from, practicing being aware, seeing how the suffering clearly, right? It's not through thinking. It's not like, oh, I've been really suffering, I need to let go. It's an experiential thing. Oh, experiencing the suffering, the tightness, the contraction, the anger, the hurt, the fear, the malice, experiencing it moment to moment to moment, then all of a sudden, a letting go happens. Yeah, an ease happens with sustained mindfulness. We see underneath the fear, see underneath the mental hindrances. When we see everything clearly, the mental hindrances drop away, and ease and peace and love and compassion and patience arises naturally out of that. Yeah. Anyhow, like I said, it's not a cognitive thing. It's an intuitive insight process through being present. But someone could be telling me for the past week, oh, don't stress yourself out. You're working yourself up. Don't worry about any of this stuff. Just let it go. Do you think my mind would let it go? You try putting up with all these contractors. That's what my mind would say, right? No, I had to experience it and see it clearly. That's where the intuitive wisdom comes from, these flashes. And what happens is, the next time I'm dealing with contractors, that insight is already there. I don't have to keep it, you know what I mean? I might still have the insight again, but it'll be at a deeper level. I'll let go a lot sooner and easier, and be a lot less contracted. Yeah, and this all happens through insight meditation. People are like, I don't have to sit formally and meditate every day. I can just be mindful each moment. Well, I don't. This path came through deep cultivation of formal meditation practice. The Buddha taught that we can develop this panya that emerges through practice, through profound, deep level practice, through cultivation of the mind. So I don't know if we can develop it without sustained, regular, on the chair cushion practice, but that's been my experience. But they change us, these insights, these intuitive insights, they change us on a cellular level. They're pretty profound and freeing. It's through training, right? But then there's something else besides these intuitive insights that free us. The Buddha taught that he in those days, they talked about magical, mystical powers that everybody had. They were calling abinya, yeah, abinya. The extraordinary powers and knowledge that a lot of practitioners in the Buddha's time, then Buddha developed all 6 of the powers, and then several of his disciples, meditators, developed these supernormal powers. And they talked about them like they was normal. They're in the suttas, like this person can walk on water, this disciple, had all these psychic powers. Um, and some of the powers included remembering people's past lives, telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance, telekinesis. Yeah, all kinds of weird things that a lot of people could, through deep practice, right? Through deep meditation practice. And the Buddha said that these supernormal powers develop from concentration meditation, through having the 4 absorption concentrations, the jhana practices, right? Then we can develop these supernormal powers. How are they associated with intuitive insight? The Buddha held the intuitive insight as the number 1 power. Uh, because it's the only one that can free us from suffering. The only one that can free us from this escape of fearing and worrying and the fears of being a human being. So he saw these supranormal powers as inferior to the attainment of liberation through intuitive insight. Right? In fact, he saw them as a potential hindrance to developing intuitive insight. There's stories of people who could walk on water, walk through walls, become invisible, levitate, make copies of themselves. Yeah, the Buddha was said to be able to do all of those things, and there are different stories of him doing. I don't know how true they are. Yeah, there's a lot there. But Sariputta was his number 1 student. He was known to have the greatest wisdom, intuitive wisdom of all of his students. Mahamoggallana was his 2nd student. He was one of the, his supernormal divine power. He could hear any sounds, whether near or far, see things through obstructions. He could also travel any place he liked in an instant. And there were a lot of sutta stories about him performing miraculous powers to help teach the Dhamma to people in other, hundreds or thousands of miles away. Yeah, he would often show up and help the Buddha do some teaching when they were far, far away from each other. Subhita, the Buddha praised Subhita as the foremost in realizing emptiness, the power of emptiness. Pretty interesting. And Aniruddha gained enlightenment and attained powers of the heavenly eye. The heavenly eye is when you can see. This person was blind, and when he achieved the heavenly eye powers, he could see again. Not only could he see again, but he could see into the heavens and talk to people who've already passed away. So there are all these stories of supernormal powers. Upalavarna was a woman who had the strongest supernormal powers of all the women. So it wasn't just with men. But he thought that these supernormal powers can deter people because you can get stuck in longing for greatness and vanity, ego around these supernormal powers, and that he didn't think that one should get lost in them. He actually told his disciples to not perform any of their supernormal powers to other people, and because he didn't want anyone coming to meditate just so that they could have supernormal powers. He wanted them to come meditate to become free, right? And there's one famous story where a rich man who put up a pole in order to test the monks, And on the top of this pole, he put a bowl, and he told the monks and nuns, whoever could get the bowl can keep it, some golden bowl or something. So one of the monks levitated up there and got the bowl and then floated back down. The people were mesmerized, and then the Buddha chastised this monk who did that, because he told the monk that you are like a prostitute who shows off his wares for money. um, yeah, but he wanted people to seek enlightenment, and only use your supernormal powers in order to help other people become more free, right? So how are these compared to intuition? You know, we make it all so magical and mystical and like, oh my God. But the truth is, the more we practice, the more we have access to all of these gifts. The intuition, supernormal powers, if you're going to develop them. Um, yeah, yeah, I've had several supernormal power experiences since I started meditating. And I got lost. I really did. I was working as an intuitive. I got lost, psychic, in the whole ego part of these supernormal powers. And I had to see that they were actually stopping me from being free, right? And once I saw how much my ego was attached to these, you know, I stopped. I stopped doing all of these magic tricks, so to speak, and focus most of my energy now on becoming free. Because the biggest miracle is to be free from suffering, is it not? To be happy, to be peaceful, to be present for ourselves and others. Yeah. So there's a lot, I'm sure I always say this, there's a lot more, right? There's a lot more than what I've just said, and people have different experiences with intuition. Um, yeah, and misunderstandings. So thank you for your kind and loving attention. And may you be present and intuitive as your practice develops.